I was actually a part-time careers counsellor, and I was a member of the CAV then, but I probably became more of a member of the CAV when I was a full-time careers counsellor. So I started in my role at Berwick Secondary College as an assistant careers counsellor. Back in those days, in 1987 was when I started. There was a full-time careers counsellor in every school, and it was mandated. Unfortunately, that's changed, which is a shame. And I was responsible for work experience at that stage. But later on, I worked as an assistant, and then as time went on, the careers counsellor left and there was a vacancy. And so they tapped me on the shoulder and said, would I like to be a careers counsellor? That would have been in 2000. And shortly after that, in about 2004, 2005, I actually put my hand up to be part of the association. In those days, it was out in Carlton in a fairly small room in a primary school out in Carlton. The school is still there. And certainly we made the move to Hawthorn and then here to Greensborough. And the association is barely recognisable these days. It's phenomenal how much it has grown, really. Yeah.
Well, my first experience in careers was when I was at Faulkner Tech back in the early 70s, and about 74, 75, there was a senior teacher who looked after careers. As far as I could tell, he didn't do a lot more than open the mail, but he decided that he had enough on his plate, and he asked me and a needlework teacher to take over careers, because I would be responsible for boys' careers and she would be responsible for girls' careers. Fortunately, we got on well and we worked as a team and didn't divide it up in quite that way, but that was my first involvement. And then a couple of years into that, doing that as very much a part-time role, the opportunity came up. The school was one of the schools, as that program expanded, they were given a full-time careers counsellor, and that was about 76 or 77. And I did the program with Betty Levy, who ran that program of training for a number of years, and that was a 4 weeks spread throughout the year. And I remember we did it out at Maribyrnong Migrant Hostel. That enabled the country participants to have some accommodation because the hostel wasn't particularly heavily booked, I guess, at that stage. They lived on campus and we would just turn up each day. So that was my involvement then.
Oh, they were definitely one of the key things that I found incredibly useful as a person starting out. They had extraordinary conferences for beginning careers counsellors. And I don't know how I would have coped in a full-time role without that mentoring and without that particular conference. So they were certainly doing that. There was a little bit of professional development, certainly advocacy for the profession, but certainly what is on offer now in the association is extraordinary. And I think, even the fact that we're training in a more formal sense. I know when I did my postgraduate education in careers, there wasn't anything on offer here at ACE. I actually did it at ACU.
I'd agree that one of the big things that the association did at those times was the New Careers Counsellors Conference, which was usually held stinking hot weather in Ballarat or Geelong or somewhere like that, at the sort of only a couple of weeks into the school year, which was great for the new people doing it because they'd had a couple of weeks of trying to learn everything on their feet, and suddenly they were surrounded by people who knew a little bit more and other people like them who were just getting started. And certainly the feedback we got from those sessions was incredibly positive, and a lot of the people then went on to enrol in courses such as the ones you mentioned there, Enza. Yep.
And they were at least 2 or 3 days back in those days, and I can recall that even that helped foster a sense of collegiality, which I think's always been a very strong point of the association. and one of the things I love about being a careers counsellor. Very much so, and especially with different groups of students. You know, I certainly know that in the cohorts where I have taught, they've been very, very different, and so you have to have that knowledge. It has to be up to date, and so being able to call on other practitioners, and they're always incredibly giving of their time, and I hope I am too, and I know you are, Frank. It's something that we just do it. Everyone gives of themselves for the benefit of young people, and I think that's the one thing that I do like about our profession, is that we're all in it for the same reason.
And I think that's one of the great pleasures, as you say, when you've been in the job for a few years, to be able to work with people who are getting started and learn from them as well as anything you can pass on.
Absolutely. I mean, and there's been so many changes. You know, when I think of it, we were talking before that when we first started, there was a register for careers for work experience students going out on their sort of placement, and you actually had to handwrite where every student was going on a ledger and actually submit it to Trades Hall Council.
And I remember that Trades Hall thing because they took their role quite seriously. I remember one day when I was at Faulkner, I had a phone call and the guy said, "This is Ken Stone, the Secretary of the Trades Hall Council," so the big boss of the union movement. I said, "Oh, yes." And he said, "I notice you've got 3 students going to," it was a motorbike place, big. And he said, that you're only meant to have X number of students per number of staff. And I said, "Well, actually, it's a very large organisation and they're working in 3 different sections of the organisation." And he said, "Oh, okay, then we'll approve it." And I thought, wow, gee, they do take the role seriously.
Very different now, that's for sure. And we didn't have safe at work training back in those days either. There was none of that.
Off you go.
Yeah. So to think back on those days and to see how vastly different it was is pretty extraordinary. But certainly our new practitioners, their knowledge of technology, and of course everything's online. We've all got websites. We've all got Zoom or Google Meets or something like that. We've lived through the pandemic, so the amount of changes has been phenomenal.
4-week course was about all that was available in terms of further education in careers, and now it's far more common for people to either be undertaking or have already undertaken postgraduate studies in careers when they take up the careers role. So that's certainly changed. Technology, absolutely. The first time I had access to a computer in the careers job, I had the school at Faulkner had a couple where on the big floppy disks you could do a few bits and pieces and so on. But was at Braemar, and I used to, over the weekend, make 3 or 4 trips from my office on the 2nd floor down to the car to load the computer, the drive, the printer and something else, so I could take it home and work on stuff at the weekend and then lug it all in again on Monday morning. The thought that you would just have access to that all the time was just wasn't around.
I think working certainly when I was on the committee, and you would have been too, Frank, I think at the time when we were working on the professional standards for careers counsellors and formalising that in order to, I think, to let our school communities and our leadership, to make them aware of the importance of staying current, having relevant professional development and experience, and also really making sure that they understood the nature of the role. I think our hope's always been to advocate for our profession and make sure that there are a certain number of careers counsellors in all schools. I think we've probably had mixed success with that. Some schools take it much more seriously than others, and it makes a difference if you're in one of those schools that does that does value what you do. And I think that's to the benefit of everyone too. If we can keep promoting that, that would be fabulous.
And I think the work that the CEAV has done in developing the benchmarking process has been very helpful for practitioners out in the field. It's enabled many cases for them to be able to say to their principals, look, this is where the standards should be. This is the resourcing that should be in place. We've been told by a professional association that we're not up to that standard. And so it doesn't always work, you don't always get the outcomes, but at least there's evidence then to support the case.
That's right. And that evidence-based practice is very important. It's incredibly important. And I don't think we could have got to that point without the work that the association has done behind the scenes over decades, really. Yeah.
I think the association has been very helpful in that regard. Not every practitioner will be making direct contact with the CAV or ACE as it is now, but they will, in almost every case, be actively engaged with their local careers group, and those groups are then coordinated and supported by the CAV or ACE. So it might be one step removed. You might speak to a practitioner and say, oh, look, I don't often ring up the CAV. Oh, but which careers group are you in? I'm in Knox or I'm in Yarra or whatever. What do you do if I'll ring someone from there, etc., etc. So it's sometimes one step removed, but it's still feeding through because the ACE is feeding that information through to those local careers groups.
And I think that's an effective model.
Yes.
Too, because I can imagine that probably the CAV and ACE would be inundated if every careers practitioner had to do that. So the fact that we can sort of triage it through our local groups, I think is very important. And careers practitioners are always involved in their regional groups. That they're very important, and they're always at every meeting I've ever been to, at any regional meeting, we always have an ACE report as well.
Yes.
So yes, I think ACE has been fabulous in supporting careers practitioners. There's no question of that.
Regional groups, as I said, are extremely important. Some are very large. I mean, and Enza as well, was a member of the Yarra Careers Group for a long time. And I think as careers groups or regional groups get larger, they obviously have more pull in the sense of you can get more tertiary representatives, you get more industry people willing to come, because if you can say, well, we'll have 50 people at the meeting, well, yeah, that's worth coming to. If you've got 4, maybe. So size matters. But even the small groups are extremely valuable as well. In fact, in many cases, some of the country-based groups that I've gone to, the people know each other really, really well, and they are a very strong support network. So whether it's large or small, it's effective. They just work in slightly different ways.
Yeah. So I've been involved in 4 different regional groups. So Dandenong Valley Careers Education Association, which I was actually a president of for a while. When I was at Berwick, that was quite a large group with a variety of schools based in it, but it was a very proactive group. And then when I moved to Wantirna, we had a very small group, and that was the Knox Careers Group. But even though that was small, we did some extraordinary PD together. We'd have big days out. We'd formulate scholarships with our local TAFEs for students who were quite needy of extra support. So we were able to, in those regional groups, sort of tailor it to our schools and settings. And we were very, very close. And then, of course, when I moved across to, and actually, as I was at Wantirna, I also went to the Maroondah group, which was quite a big group as well, out in Ringwood, that had a different flavour. And now I'm part of the Yarra Careers group. The amount of information that those careers groups pass on to their members, the professional development that they conduct, in addition to what the ACE and CAV conduct, is very important to keep us up to date. So crucial. I mean, in our space, things change very quickly. So we have to rely on our regional groups to stay up to date and on the sort of information that ACE publish all the time through their electronic news bulletin. So it's a lot of reading, but it's all very worthwhile, and we need to stay on top of all of that. It's very important. I would say the highlight for me as a careers practitioner, students don't really change much in all my decades as a careers counsellor. Students just want to be heard. And if they've got someone who is proactive about helping them find and access information and teaching them the core career development skills, that hasn't changed. But what has changed over time is the sheer volume of information that comes to us, the pathways that are open to students. That's been fabulous. When I think of what it was like when I first started, you know, if a student wanted to go to do a particular course and they didn't get the school, it was pretty much just all over Red Rover. There was no way they were going to get there. There's so many more options for students, and I think that's of benefit. But I think technology, the changing nature of careers themselves, has added a richness to our space and our work. And I just think it's an exciting place. And even though we've lived through some pretty horrendous things like COVID, which was the ultimate disruptor, I'm always in awe of how incredibly positive students are about their future. They're a joy to work with. It's such a privilege. And I think that's, for me, the standout. I loved being a classroom teacher, but I adore being a careers counsellor. I feel very, very privileged to be working in this space.